So, those old men yelling from the sky that I mentioned? This was a summons by the greybeards, who are masters of this whole dragon shouting thing. Upon learning this, the game gives us a new active quest, which is to go visit them all the way up at the top of High Hrothgar. We head out, doing a lot more alchemy ingredient gathering along the way, until we find ourselves accosted by some rude roadside necromancers. I dispatch with them, and while they don't really have anything worth taking, the distraction does cause me to take note of something I'd totally overlooked: standing stones. There are 13 of these bad boys scattered around the world, each providing different effects. The one we're looking at right now is the Ritual Stone, which allows us to reanimate all dead bodies around us once per day. And I'm not even going to take the time to discuss how this wouldn't be ethically vegan, because I checked the powers granted by the other standing stones and found one which is way more useful to us: the Serpent, which gives us access to a once per day spell that deals 25 poison damage to a single target and paralyzes them for 5 seconds. The only once per day aspect sucks, sure, but all things said, that's still way better than the once per never that we currently dish out in the spellcasting department. We love casting spells. So, this Serpent Standing Stone boon definitely goes on my list of things to pick up eventually. I get into a few other tussles along the way, which, after a death or two, really begins to hammer home just how weak our vegan lifestyle has left us. In the end, I try to avoid combat wherever possible. You know, just keeping my head down, not trying to stir up any—
What's a milk drinker like you doing out here?
Motherfucker, we have already done this bit. A little more strife along the way, before ultimately arriving at the foothills to the 7,000 Steps, the name for the pathway leading up to High Hrothgar, where the greybeards reside. The NPCs you encounter along the way sort of hype this segment up as a challenge, but it's not really that big of a deal. Sure, it's a lot of walking, and there are some enemies looking to harm us, but you can just avoid them. And walking? Walking is nothing to us. We have to walk everywhere. Like, I'm not joking, that's our only means of travel. The only alternatives out there to walking would be riding a horse, which isn't vegan because that commodifies their labor, or taking a horse-drawn cart, which that's just riding a piece of wood that's riding a horse, which isn't vegan. But it's whatever. All we really lose out on without access to these travel methods is A, the inexplicable ability to scale sheer cliff faces, and B, a couple precious hours of our finite lifespan spent slowly jogging in a video game. But I mean, who cares? It wasn't like I was going to use that time for anything meaningful anyway. We slink past a few more threats, get our 7,000 steps in for the day, arrive at the greybeards, and then scream back and forth at each other for what feels like half an hour while they confirm that we are indeed the Dragonborn.
You like that? Huh? You like that?
A fun thing to note here is that these guys managed to teach us both the second word of the Unrelenting Force shout, as well as the first word of the Whirlwind Sprint shout, both without needing to use a dragon soul. They just beam the knowledge right into our heads, which makes these shouts totally vegan. Considering that our primary damage source right now is a woodcutting axe, the ability to reliably put enemies into a stun state with Unrelenting Force allows us to get a couple free hits in, which, hey, that's extremely useful. After the shouting match, the greybeards are mostly convinced that we're the Dragonborn, but give us one final trial to prove ourselves to them. We must first travel to the ruins of Ustengrav to recover the Horn of Jurgen Windcaller. And yeah, we'll totally get around to that, but I first have a very important stop to make. You see, we're taking a detour all the way up to Winterhold. Why, you ask? Well, I did some research and found something very interesting. Along the way to Winterhold, I cut through some ruins, collect some more cash, and quickly pop into Windhelm to unlock it as a fast travel location for later. As we head back out to continue our trek, we're accosted by some strange-looking robed figures who seem to be mad at us for claiming to be the Dragonborn. Okay, no, seriously, why does everybody get all indignant about this? Is it just so hard to believe that, oh god, they want to kill me, they've got magic, abort. We probably couldn't take these guys head on, but luckily, I'm an Imperial, and so I can finally get some use from that Voice of the Emperor ability, forcing them to calm down just long enough for us to slip away. Or so I thought. This ability is very useless. Luckily, the guards kind of handled the situation for me. Now, I did say I wouldn't be relying on NPCs to do my dirty work because that felt like abusing a loophole, but I don't know, I don't really feel like this was my thing to deal with. Random cultists attacking visitors to your city kinda seems like exactly what a city guard is explicitly put in place to prevent. Just, they're doing their job. All this situation did to our benefit is unlock a DLC quest that I'm realistically never gonna get around to anyway. Back to adventure, we waltz all the way over to Winterhold, where we meet our new best friend, Firalda. You see, Firalda is a very special NPC for this run. She stands at the entry point to the College of Winterhold, which is basically the very lackluster Mages Guild of Skyrim. We don't really care about any of that though. No. What makes her important to us is that she requires you show some basic competency in spellcasting before you can enter the college. And to show this competency, she asks that you cast a specific spell for her. If you don't already know said spell, she'll offer to sell it to you for a measly 30 gold. But the reason this is amazing to us is because she doesn't just sell you a spell tome, she sells you the spell. Like, you pay her and bam, you can cast the spell now. There are no leather tomes involved. This is a direct metaphysical transfer of knowledge, and that's vegan, baby. Now, which spell she asks you to cast is randomly selected from a list of 5. Healing Hands, Mage Light, Conjure Flame Atronach, Fear, and a Firebolt. When I first spoke to her, she unfortunately asked us to cast Healing Hands, which, as thematic and pacifist as that spell might sound, the ability to heal someone isn't particularly useful to us. So far, we haven't exactly had many encounters in our journey where my first thought was, man, I wish I had a way to make this guy healthier. Luckily, we can reload a quick save until we get exactly what we want. And what we want is Firebolt. Sure, normally Firebolt isn't exactly an amazing spell by any means, but given what we, as a vegan, currently have access to, Firebolt is a godsend. Throughout the run as a whole, there were 3 key elements to this vegan build that I relied heavily upon. The first was the woodcutting axe, and now with the acquisition of the Fireball spell, we have acquired the second element. With this, hopefully our upcoming challenges should be a bit easier, but there are a few topics I'd like to discuss before we get back to the main quest. First off, I just mentioned that healing hands would be useless to us, but what about if we had a companion who needed healing? Like Lydia, for instance. I glossed over this info as it happened, but Jarl Balgruuf just assigned Lydia to be our housecarl after we, helped defeat that dragon earlier. I mean, I did say early on in the series that I wouldn't be standing back and letting other NPCs complete the run for me, but it's not like the concept of cooperation is non-vegan. Provided that we, as the player, do our best to participate meaningfully, and we're holding our companion to the same vegan code of ethics, this could arguably be a mutually beneficial relationship. Teaming up to tackle problems is totally vegan. Unless your theoretical teammates always use leather-based armor and weapons, which they refuse to remove because the NPCs in this game will only ever replace their equipment with a superior alternative. And, unsurprisingly, vegan equipment in this game is literally always an inferior alternative. So yeah, no, I'm not going to be teaming up with anyone. And honestly, even if I did, it'd be a total nightmare trying to get these people to distinguish between which enemies we're okay with fighting and which ones we're not. Anyway, the second and much more pressing thing that I'd like to address here would be the other spells that can be acquired in a direct manner, similar to how we just gained Firebolt through Firalda, the most glaring and obvious of which are vampire spells. Being a vampire in this game is a bit of a mixed bag. You can acquire vampirism incidentally at any point when attacking a vampire. It's just a type of transmissible pathogen in the Elder Scrolls series. And like, catching syphilis, while usually not desirable, is, for all intents and purposes, vegan. So in this context, the process of contracting vampirism is totally fine within our ethical framework. In fact, this exact situation happens a bit later in this very playthrough due to a random encounter with some vampires. Having said this, the concept of being a vampire, like the requirement to consume the blood of mortals, this makes vampirism very not vegan. But as a vampire, you always have the option to just not feed on blood. That would keep us vegan. And in fact, not feeding is precisely the means through which you acquire most of your vampiric powers in Skyrim. But these powers come paired with a handful of nasty detriments. You see, the whole being a vampire thing operates around a stage-based system, which advances by 1 for every 24 hours that have passed during which you haven't consumed blood. If we were to contract vampirism, we as a vegan would logically be relegating ourselves to just never feeding on blood. So, ipso facto, we would then inevitably progress to the fourth and final stage of vampirism. With this in mind, let's quickly take a look at what fourth stage vampirism actually entails. Well, first off, at this tier we would gain access to a whopping 5 innate vampire spells. Number 1, Vampiric Drain, which allows us to magically drain health from a target. This is literally just extracting resources from another sentient creature for our own benefit. That makes it possibly the least vegan spell imaginable, honestly. Number 2, Vampiric Servant, which reanimates a dead body to fight for us. And I'm gonna argue if using leather made from a corpse isn't vegan, then using just the whole ass corpse, that's definitely not vegan. Number 3, Vampiric Sight, which provides improved night vision, a spell so useless that it's literally outperformed by the brightness slider found within the display settings menu. Number 4, Vampire Seduction, which can be used to calm a single target for a limited time once per day. You know, literally just a shittier version of that one ability I already have access to as an Imperial, the one I'm constantly trying to find a single use case for. Yeah, that one. And lastly, number 5, Embrace of Shadows, which gives us night vision and invisibility for 3 minutes once per day. And hey, I'll admit it, that one actually doesn't seem half bad. So, these are the spells we gain access to.
But wait, there's more!
In addition to those, we also acquire a handful of passive effects. Number 1, a 50% resistance to frost. Nice. But that comes paired with number 2, a 50% weakness to fire. Not so nice. Number 3, a 100% resistance to disease. Pretty sweet. Number 4, a 100% resistance to poison. Pretty sweeter. Number 5, NPCs immediately turn hostile if they recognize that you're a vampire. Hey, Dunce here, recording some more voiceover way after the rest of the vocals you've been hearing. So this little bit about NPCs attacking you if you're a vampire. Yeah, that hasn't been true for literally over a decade at this point. No, Bethesda, they removed this downside when the Dawnguard DLC dropped back in 2012, which was probably an attempt at encouraging players to actually engage with the whole being a vampire thing. Seeing as how at this point in time it's actively easier to purchase one of the re-releases of Skyrim with all the DLC bundled in, I'd say, yeah, we can safely ignore this downside. Anyway, number 6, 25% better stealth. Probably need something like that to avoid hostile townsfolk, honestly.
What was that?
Number 7, 25% better illusion spells, which is kinda useless in our situation, you know, having no illusion spells. Number 8, while outdoors between the hours of 5 a.m. and 7 p.m., your stamina, magicka, and health are reduced by 60 points.
Oh no.
Plus, during those same hours, you lose the ability to naturally recover any of these resources. This would kinda suck. It'd make our whole wait after every combat encounter to recover thing totally unviable for over half of each day, so we'd really need to micromanage what time it is. That's it though. These are all the things that we get for being a vampire. I mean, yeah, there's some good stuff in there, but overall, I'd argue nothing to write home about. When you really factor in the- wait, what's this? 20 whole points of damage added to each of our unarmed strikes?
Hold the fort.
That's legitimately amazing. Being a vampire's awesome. Just kidding. Turns out this is fake news. Once again, it seems that I found a persistent online misconception by total accident while doing research for one of these videos. Again, this is the 4th time this has happened now. For context, I decided to just, double check this claim from the Elder Scrolls Wiki because I didn't seem to experience these same effects in game, and it turns out I wasn't crazy. This is bullshit. But it's based in a kernel of truth. You see, there are 2 extra abilities associated with vampirism found within the game's files: Vampiric Strength and Dread Cloak. Dread Cloak is acquired at stage 3 of vampirism and provides a free Frost Cloak spell once per day. That's cool, unironically, like not even trying to intentionally make a pun there, it's just cool. It would be very useful to us. Vampiric Strength is a passive ability which fortifies your unarmed strikes by 5 damage per stage of vampirism, which means at stage 4, you're dealing an additional 20 damage per unarmed strike, and that's just phenomenal. For comparison, our woodcutter's axe deals a measly 5 damage per swing, which is only 1 more point than the 4 base damage we deal with our unarmed strikes as an Imperial. Our Firebolt deals 25 damage per cast, plus some residual fire damage over time, but as a spell, it requires a decent amount of magicka per cast, and isn't all that efficient against fire-resistant enemies. This vampiric strength ability would bring our unarmed strike damage up from its base 4 damage to a whopping 24 damage per swing. Also, if we'd chosen to play a Khajiit, that'd take the Khajiit's base 22 damage unarmed strike up to 42 damage per swing. Just a theoretically insane amount of DPS there. This alone, like just this ability, in my mind, this would make becoming a vampire not just beneficial, but absolutely worth the downsides of added fire weakness, the sunlight issues, NPC hostility, all of it. Hell, it'd basically just be like real life for me at this point. I barely leave the house, it's not like I ever see the sun. People are already hostile to me. I'm a vegan. Alternatively, you could just wholly offset the fire weakness by playing a Dark Elf. They have a built-in racial bonus, providing a 50% resistance to fire damage. However, these two abilities aren't actually usable within the game, because the scripts detailing their effects include a preceding semicolon, rendering them inactive. When one considers that there's never been a patch to resolve this apparent oversight across the, 800 versions of Skyrim that have been released over the past 15 years? Yeah, no. It doesn't seem like this is something the developers missed, but rather something they purposefully chose to omit. Because of this, we're not factoring these abilities in, and thus, these are the effects we'd receive for becoming a vampire. I can see some usefulness scattered throughout the list here, but when you factor in the enormous drawbacks, it all becomes much less appealing. Not to mention, the only way to reverse vampirism in this game is to go through a process requiring a filled black soul gem, and as discussed in previous episodes, soul gems are filled with souls from other sentient creatures, specifically other sentient humanoid creatures in the case of black soul gems. Thus, using a filled soul gem isn't vegan. This means if we were to allow ourselves to become a vampire, we'd be permanently stuck as a vampire. For all of these reasons, I chose to avoid the vampire situation for this playthrough. Shortly after realizing that I contracted the precursor disease, Sanguinare Vampiris, I chose to reload a save from before getting infected. So yeah, being a vampire was a potentially good lead in our search for vegan spells, but unfortunately didn't quite pan out. Aside from vampire spells though, well, I checked with Reddit and basically all the other non-tome spells in the game are either not vegan or acquired from deep within random side quests. Seeing that I wasn't certain whether I'd even be able to get through these quests, I elected to keep my eyes fixed on the road ahead and continue with our adventure. So, with the newly acquired Firebolt spell, I returned to the quest at hand and the associated long walk to our destination. Eventually, we arrive at Ustengrav and get to see our new combo of Firebolt and Woodcutting Axe in action. It's admittedly, not amazing, but certainly much better than what we were working with before. We fight our way through increasingly stronger groups of spellcasters and Druger, continuing to rely on the trick of waiting an hour between most encounters, slowly working our way deeper and deeper through the catacombs. I won't lie, they killed me a time or two. We unfortunately have a fairly shallow pool of magicka to work with, and getting in melee range with an, armor rating of literally 0 is quite dangerous.
You lose.
But with persistence, we push on. Druger after Druger, skeleton after skeleton, spider after I just outran the spiders. They're just animals in their own home after all. We don't mess with those guys. At the end of the gauntlet, we arrive to the fanfare of no horn. Came here for the horn. There's no horn. I need a horn. Where's our horn? All I'm seeing is a note. Well, turns out someone else got to it first, and they want to talk to us. That person is Delphine, all the way back in Riverwood. Luckily, we've already been to Riverwood, and so we can fast travel through the world map, because that process is a vegan means of transportation. We meet with Delphine, one of the 2 tavern keepers at the Sleeping Giant Inn, and she gives us the horn of Jurgen Windcaller, but says that we really need to talk. Totally cool, Delphine, we can talk, but real quick, I just need to check something. It completely slipped my mind earlier that this horn might be an animal product, and if that's the case, we wouldn't be able to pull... Oh, wait, of course, it's a literal fucking horn. God damn it! Okay, it's been way too long since I last released a video. Huge apologies for that, but my life is back on track now, so this kind of thing shouldn't happen again going forward. If you're curious as to what exactly the holdup's been, you can read all about it as one of my awesome patrons who I'm oh so thankful for over at patreon.com/poordunce. In addition to early video access and getting your name in the credits, I've recently started sharing weekly behind the scenes content and other exclusive stuff, so, might want to check that out. In addition, I'd like to use this moment to quickly give a shout out to my turbo patrons: Ben B, Lurk Plankton, Condensed Metaphysicist, Cyan and Orange, Jade Tigers Typing, Catbread, Kira the Diamond Dog, Malacandra, Mazakine Maze, Mr. Floyd, Olive, Patrick Collins, Slowkips, Sour Pears, and Variable Gear. Thank you all so very, very much, and thank you everyone for watching.